Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Toxic Truths, the unfiltered consequences of plastic and human health. I'm Evan Palapar, a Greenpeace volunteer, an environmentalist, and also a third-year medical student, and I will be your host this morning. We are so glad to have you all with us, especially our healthcare professionals, our friends from the government and media, students, advocates, and future practitioners, and stakeholders ahead of World Environment Day, which we will celebrate in a few days. This year's theme focuses on beating plastic pollution, which is very timely in light of recent studies on how plastic impacts our health. Today, we will learn about how plastics are getting into our bodies, posing a threat to our health, and the actions we can take to protect not just the environment, but also our health. Toxic Truths, the Unfiltered Consequences of Plastic on Human Health, is presented by Greenpeace Philippines, Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, and Planetary Health Philippines with support from Miriam College Environmental Studies Institute and the Philippine Academy of Family Physicians Special Interest Group on Planetary Health. But before we proceed with the talks, let us all give a warm welcome to the Department of Health Undersecretary, Dr. Miriam Palermo Maestral, for her opening remarks.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. I would like to thank the organizers for conducting this multi-stakeholders forum entitled The Nexus of Plastic Pollution and Health. It's good to see old colleagues from our plastics effort since last year. And indeed, the time has come for us to address one of the most urgent and often overlooked challenges, the intersection between plastic pollution and public health. It is a pleasure to give this message to our participants today from the medical community, healthcare sector, and schools from different parts of the country. As we gather today to discuss how we can address the issue through robust policies and strategies, let's recognize that protecting the environment means protecting the health of our people. We must examine our systems for plastic production, consumption, and disposal. And the solutions we need should be holistic, equitable, and grounded in science. Because the health of our environment and the health of our communities are deeply and inextricably connected. Now, for several years, we have regarded plastic pollution as an environmental issue, specifically during the rainy season where plastics clog our drainage systems, rivers and oceans, narrowing our waterways and littering our community landscapes. But the truth is, plastic pollution has far more effects, which reaches deeper. Now, it is considered a growing threat to public health, one that we are now beginning to understand, thankfully. Now, from endocrine disrupting chemicals used in plastic packaging and household plastic products to nano and microplastics found in our drinking water sources, our food chain, and the air that we breathe, plastics have pervaded nearly every facet of our modern way of life. Recent studies have correlated plastics with human health, from endocrine disruptors, hormonal imbalance, reproductive disorders, and increased risk to cancer. There is also growing evidence that exposure to chemicals in plastics can be linked to a range of adverse health effects in humans. We need to protect the public, specifically the vulnerable groups like our children, elderly, and pregnant women. While we cannot definitively make definitive long-term predictions with certainty, the scientific evidence suggests that early life exposure to microplastics is a significant concern and can contribute to a range of chronic health problems over a child's lifetime. Now, the precautionary principle suggests that action to reduce exposure is warranted even with ongoing research. Now, based on the WHO document entitled Dietary and Inhalation Exposure to Nano and Microplastics Particles and Potential Implications for Human Health, A key observation is that microplastics are ubiquitous in the environment and have been detected in environmental media with direct relevance for human exposure, including air, dust, water, food, particularly seafoods, and beverages. There is increasing awareness of the occurrence of nano and microplastics in the air and their implications for human health. Now, public awareness on microplastics have increased, and so is the interest among stakeholders to address the issues and concerns on nano and microplastics. We can all agree that plastics do not belong in the environment and measures should be taken to mitigate human exposure to plastics. Now, microplastics have been detected in the air, drinking water, food, and beverages globally. Likewise, human exposure to nano and microplastics should be characterized, and further studies and research should be conducted to differentiate the sources of contamination. Given the increasing exposure to microplastics, standard methods should be used to characterize and qualify nano and microplastics of the sizes considered most relevant to human health. Now, the Department of Health issued Department Circular number 2021-0486 on the phased implementation of the prohibition on the unnecessary use of single-use plastics in hospitals, other facilities, and DOH offices. Now, the last phase of the implementation took place in January 1, 2023, where all single-use plastics covered under the department circular were no longer allowed in the DOH offices and healthcare facilities, including plastics brought in by patients and their relatives and visitors. The Food and Drug Administration has also issued FDA Circular number 2019-004, ban of bisphenol A or BPA from infant feeding bottles, sippy cups, as child care article products. So a known toxic monomer to plastics. So bisphenol A is an industrial chemical that is widely used as a monomer in the manufacture of polycarbonate. Now, a clear hard plastic used in many consumer products, including feeding bottles and sippy cups. The health sector is doing its part in looking after the welfare of the Filipinos by addressing the issue of plastics and healthcare wastes at the source, which is more economically and environmentally beneficial. The DOH is also committed to address the issue of plastic pollution as a member of the National Solid Waste Management Commission. The Department of Health has been advocating a more effective approach in minimizing future microplastic exposures. This involves reducing plastic consumption, making conscious choices to use less single-use plastic daily, in food packaging, in water bottles, etc., and choosing natural materials. We choose natural fibers, glass, or metal products instead of plastics wherever possible. Adopting new technologies for filtering out microplastics in drinking water, using water filters certified to remove microplastics. Also, be mindful of food sources. While microplastics are ubiquitous, some foods may be higher at risk, and washing produced thoroughly can also help reduce surface contamination. Improving air quality, reducing indoor dust containing microplastic fibers from textiles and other sources. And together now we can provide concrete solutions if we help each other on how to address the plastics crisis and its imminent effects on the human health. The DOH shall continue to advocate preventive measures and invest in research on the impacts of plastics and human health to prevent human exposure to toxic plastics, including nano and microplastics. So thank you very much for all for getting together and talking about this. And rest assured, the DOH is always here to support all the efforts. Once again, good morning. And sa bagong Pilipinas, remember bawat buhay mahalaga. So your efforts here are very important. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Miriam Palermo Maestral, for such a powerful and insightful keynote speech. We deeply appreciate your emphasis on how plastics and microplastics have become ubiquitous in our environment, not only in our external environment, but even in our internal biological systems. And your point about the unnecessary use of plastics in healthcare settings, I totally agree with it, because as a medical student, I also see it myself, and especially within our hospitals. That was incredibly important. Thank you so much again, Undersecretary Maestral, for the encouraging words, and we hope to engage with you more in our future events. So our first keynote speech will be coming from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Let us welcome Assistant Secretary Jacqueline Kaan.
Thank you, Miss Evan Marie. Maraming salamat. To the Greenpeace Southeast Asia Philippines, to the fellow public servants who are on board, distinguished guests of honor, fellow environmental advocates, ladies and gentlemen, isang makakalikasang pagbati po mula sa DENR. So on behalf of Undersecretary Jonas Leones, allow me to read his keynote message in this webinar entitled Toxic Truths, the Unfiltered Impacts of Plastic on Human Health. I want to begin with a stark image, one we see far too often in our beautiful Philippines. Picture our pristine coastlines, once lined with golden sand and swaying palms, now choked with plastic debris. Envision our vibrant coral reefs, once teeming with marine life, now entangled in discarded fishing nets and plastic bags. This isn't just an environmental crisis. It is a profound threat to our very well-being, a toxic truth that demands our immediate, unfiltered action and attention. For too long, plastic has been hailed as a miracle material, durable, versatile, and cheap. But the truth is that miracle has come at a catastrophic cost. The unfiltered impacts of plastic on human health are no longer a distant threat. They are a present reality, deeply intertwined with our environment, our culture, and our daily lives in the Philippines. We are a nation of islands, intimately connected to the ocean. Our reliance on seafood as a major protein source, accounting for roughly 50% of our dietary protein intake. It makes us particularly vulnerable. Studies have already detected significant amounts of microplastics in commonly consumed fish like rabbit fish, or commonly known as samaral or kitong, and milkfish or the bangus from our very own waters. When we eat this fish, we are in essence consuming the plastic waste that we ourselves have discarded. But the danger doesn't stop at our plates. Microplastics, those insidious fragments smaller than 5 millimeters, have infiltrated every corner of our environment. They are in our lakes, rivers, and even the air we breathe. A recent study in Metro Manila found microplastics in the air across 16 cities, recording some cities with the highest level. Imagine the average adult walking the streets of Metro Manila may unknowingly inhale between 5 to 8 microplastics every minute. While research is ongoing, existing international studies paint a grim picture. Microplastics, once inside us, can travel through our bloodstream, accumulate in various organs. They've been linked to a 4.5 times higher likelihood of heart attacks, strokes, or even mortality. This is particularly alarming given that cardiovascular disease is already a leading cause of death in the Philippines. They have also been found in human placentas, potentially disrupting cell processes and contributing to preeclampsia, a condition that tragically accounts for 30% of maternal deaths in our country. Beyond that, microplastics are associated with cell damage immune system disruptions, and even the destruction of red blood cells. It's not just the physical particles themselves. Plastic contain a cocktail of hazardous chemicals. Over 4,200 of them is still in use today. Phthalates commonly found in food packaging and other plastic products have been linked to heart disease, contributing to hundreds of thousands of deaths globally. Given our sachet economy, where millions of single-use sachets are consumed daily, for food, cosmetics, personal care products, the potential for exposure to these harmful chemicals is immense. Our beautiful archipelago, with its more than 7,500 islands, faces unique challenges. According to reports, we generate approximately 2.7 million metric tons of plastic waste annually. And a significant portion, an estimated 20%, ends up in our precious oceans. The pervasive nature of single-use plastics, coupled with insufficient waste management infrastructure, means our waterways and coastal communities are constantly battling for this deluge. The irony is bitter. The very ocean that sustains so many Filipinos' livelihoods, from fishing to tourism, is being suffocated by our own waste. The good news is the Philippines is not standing idly by. We have landmark policies like the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000 or the RA 9003 and the more recent the Extended Producer Responsibility Act of 2002 or Republic Act 11898. We are also actively participating in the National Plastic Action Partnership or the NPAP, a multi-stakeholder platform aimed at fostering collaboration and accelerating our transition to circular economy. These are vital steps. RA 9003 is a landmark piece. It is a landmark piece of legislation that laid the foundation for a comprehensive and ecological approach to solid waste management. RA 9003 shifted the paradigm from simply disposing of waste to actively managing it ecologically, with a strong emphasis on mandatory waste segregation at source. The establishment of materials recovery facilities, or the MRF, the closure of open dump sites, and the transition to sanitary landfills. The law places the primary responsibility for solid waste management to local government units, requiring them to formulate and implement their own 10-year solid waste management plans. Meanwhile, the EPR Act is a game changer, building upon RA 9003 by shifting a significant portion of responsibility for plastic packaging waste from the local government units and consumers to the producers themselves. This recognizes that those who introduce plastic packaging into the market should also be accountable for its end-of-life management. The EPR Act sets ambitious recovery aspects or targets for plastic packaging from 20% by the end of 2023 to 40% by 2024, gradually increasing to 80% by 2028 and beyond. Major consumer good companies like Unilever, Nestle, and Coca-Cola, and other obliged enterprises in the country, which heavily rely on plastic packaging, are now required to set up systems for collecting and recycling or recovering their plastic waste from the market. Moreover, the law recognizes the vital role of informal waste pickers and aggregators in the waste recovery chain and encourages their integration into formal EPR systems. The NPAP, on the other hand, is a multi-stakeholder platform designed to accelerate the Philippines' transition to a circular economy for plastics. While the law provides the framework, NPAP brings together the diverse actions needed to make it a reality. In essence, RA 9003 set the stage for responsible waste management, emphasizing individual and LGU responsibility. The EPR Act of 2022 elevated this by making producers directly accountable for plastics they put into the market, driving upstream solutions. The NPAP then serves as the crucial coordinating body, ensuring that these legal frameworks are implemented effectively through broad collaboration, innovation, and strategic planning, all with the ultimate goal of turning the tide against plastic pollution in the Philippines. However, policies alone are not enough. This problem requires a fundamental shift in mindset, a collective awakening to this toxic truth. It requires us as individuals to question our consumption habits. Do we truly need the single-use plastic? Can we embrace reusable alternatives? It requires our communities to demand better waste management and infrastructure. And it requires our industries to innovate, to prioritize sustainable materials, and design for a truly circular economy, where waste is not merely managed, but eliminated. As Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. This webinar is a testament to that belief. We are those thoughtful, committed citizens. Let us use this platform not just to understand the problem, but to ignite a powerful movement for change. Let us advocate for stronger regulations, support sustainable businesses, and educate our families and our communities. The health of our people, the vibrancy of our environment, and the future of our nation depend on the choices we make today. Let us choose health over convenience, sustainability rather over disposability. Let us choose to unveil these toxic truths and collectively work towards a Philippines where plastic no longer poisons our bodies of water or pollute our bodies and our home. The theme for Unfiltered Action is now. With that, maraming salamat po for inviting us at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Wow, thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Jacqueline Cancan, for your impassioned and evidence-based keynote message. You have laid bare one of the most urgent toxic truths of our time, that microplastics are infiltrated every corner of our environment. They're no longer confined to oceans and landfills. As you highlighted, they're even through research, it confirms that these plastic particles have found their way to the organs of the human body, and alarmingly even to the placenta. And your talk beautifully, I might add, that it complemented beautifully with what Yusek Maestral earlier underscored, that policy change must go hand in hand with behavioral and systemic transformation. So to everyone with us today, students, practitioners, public servants, advocates, you're part of this effort. Every choice we make, every conversation we spark, and every policy we push forward contributes to reversing this toxic side. So again, thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Cancan, for that wonderful speech. We look forward to working with DENR for solutions on the plastic crisis we're in. At this point, we would like to call in one of our partners to deliver his keynote message on planetary health. Let's all welcome Dr. Renzo Ginto, who is the convener of Planetary Health Philippines and associate professor at the Single Health Duke NUS Global Health Institute.
Thank you very much. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Good morning. And advance Happy World Environment Day. As we know, we are celebrating WED this week on June 5, and that's why this convening is very timely, important, and even urgent. And of course, I am very thrilled to be collaborating again with many friends and partners who are co-organizing this webinar. And so again, thank you very much. And I hope that we can continue collaborating and working together towards addressing some of the most pressing challenges that we are facing at the nexus of human health and the planet's health. I am going to, in a way, reinforce and re-echo some of the messages that our dear officials from government, from the DOH and from DNR have already shared in their opening remarks. But also, I hope that in this short presentation, I'm also able to help set the scene, present some of the emerging evidence, and also put on the table some provocations, questions to ponder about. Because later on, we have a fantastic panel. We have colleagues and friends who will be reflecting on, this existential challenge of plastics and how it is reshaping the health, again, of our people and planet. Again, in this era of planetary health, a while ago, Ivan already mentioned the phrase planetary health. And so how can we address plastics in these important, trying, difficult, and complex times? And I want to first begin by defining what planetary health is. You are more familiar perhaps with the term public health. You've heard a while ago from Yusek Mestral the phrase public health. We are concerned about the health of people, which is vital and important and essential. But we cannot anymore ignore the health of the planet on which our health greatly depends. And so I always remind our future doctors and health professionals and nurses, but also for even those who are not within the health sector, that in this day and age, we now have two patients, not just the people, but also the planet. That, again, is what planetary health is about. You can see you have the kid wearing a face mask, trying to protect herself from the unseen coronavirus. And you may be hearing in the news there are some COVID outbreaks happening, for example, here in Singapore or across Southeast Asia. So let's all be careful. But also on the other hand, we have Mother Earth also wearing a face mask, trying to protect herself from the ecological damages that we are inflicting on her as a result of our irresponsible human activities. And one of these, environmental harms that we are imposing on Mother Earth is plastic pollution, which is really what we're talking about in these convening. And planetary health is about this recognition that we do have this cyclical, bidirectional relationship between the health of people and the health of the planet. The two, in fact, are inseparable. They're deeply interconnected, intrinsically intertwined. And I just want to quote Chief Seattle, who is an indigenous leader of the Americas, that the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to earth. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to that web, he does to himself. And so, imagine we are, you can imagine that we are weaving into the fabric, into the web of life, these strands and threads of plastic. And in a way, we are contaminating and polluting and destroying this web of life with the use and excessive use of plastic. And in return, these disruptions, these destructions do come back to us in the form of human disease, despair, disability, or even death. All of them are letter Ds, right? You destroy and you get disease. You disrupt and you get death. And that is really what's happening now. Again, the cyclical relationship between people and the planet. And yes, planetary health may sound like a new term to you, but this idea is as ancient as the human civilization. We just need to listen to our indigenous voices, to ancient cultures, to our different faith traditions, including here in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. And we will realize these messages are not new, and are not a novel invention. And when we are looking at plastic, we cannot separate it from the other major global environmental changes that we are witnessing and experiencing at the moment. So this diagram shows to you the changes, the dramatic changes that we're seeing. Okay. On your left, you're seeing the underlying drivers being enumerated, our culture, values, and behavior. A while ago, I heard this phrase, behavior change, right? How can we stir positive behavior change? It starts with mindset change, values change, culture change. And we also need to start looking at our consumption patterns and the demographic changes that we are seeing, migration, continuous population growth, aging, we are living longer lives now, and that means more years to consume and even to pollute. So we need to start thinking about how do we live longer while also not harming further the planet. And also the technological advancements that we are witnessing around us. Everyone wants the latest version of a particular gadget. All of these result in a wide array of ecological changes, as you can see in this graphic. Climate change, which is also another existential and urgent threat that we are facing. We have climate deadlines. 2030 is what's written in our international agreements, that we need to curb our emissions, and reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 2030. And we know climate change is also linked to plastic pollution, because they are there are similar industries that create the plastic and also emit the carbon. And then you also have other problems there I will not elaborate, which then ultimately affect the health of human populations. And you can see on your right, there's a list of diseases there. And really, when we talk about whether it's climate change or environmental pollution, specifically plastic pollution, there is no single disease group that is going to be immune to the effects of environmental change. So to the health professionals in the room, I always say, regardless of your specialty, regardless of the role that you play in the health sector, you have a role to play in climate action and tackling plastic pollution. And for those colleagues who are not in the health sector, the health of your children, the health of your families, the health of your communities will be affected. And you must also join the health community in fighting the environmental effects, on human health. I want to introduce to you another concept or framework. You may have encountered before this phrase, planetary boundaries, the planetary boundaries framework. When we say it's a boundary, if there's a wall, if there's a boundary, if there's a limit, you cannot go beyond the boundary. You cannot transgress, cross over, overshoot beyond the boundary, because if you do so, something wrong happens, right? If you cross beyond a national border without a visa, then you get arrested, right? And if we cross the planet's boundaries, something wrong happens, and that wrong thing that happens is that the planet becomes less conducive for human survival. And here you will see a diagram showing to you that the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden identified 9 planetary boundaries. And out of the 9 boundaries that were identified, 6 have already been violated as we speak. Climate change, biosphere integrity or biodiversity, because over the past century, we've seen the fastest rate of extinction of creatures great and small. Land system change, we've been turning every natural habitat into a subdivision, a golf course, a recreation center, a casino, a new airport, etc., creating new cities out of forest ecosystems, for instance. Freshwater change. Now our rivers and lakes are not only consumed, but also over contaminated with all the trash that and chemicals that we are releasing into them. The biogeochemical flows of phosphorus and nitrogen, 2 important elements in the environment, already disrupted, already destroyed because of our global addiction to large scale to artificial fertilizers in our pursuit for of a large-scale agriculture. And lastly, as you can see, the last planetary boundary that has been violated already is the boundary for novel entities. When we say novel entities, these are new compounds and chemicals that we invent in the laboratory, we manufacture in the factory, we release to the environment. And one of the most important examples is plastic. And plastic now is floating in our oceans and in our seas. They are choking our rivers and lakes and waterways. Basically, plastic has now transgressed the planetary boundary. And as you can see in this diagram, or the picture, on your right, you may be familiar, or you may remember this report from a few years ago. Philippines was ranked the top ocean plastic polluter. So we do have, we're playing an important role in the transgression of the planetary boundary. And the Philippines has a critical role to play to stop this transgression or crossing over the boundary and even reversing the situation. And I hope this conversation will generate solutions on how we ensure that we are protecting and respecting the planetary boundary for plastic. But it's not just the planetary boundary for plastic that we have violated. We also, through plastic, have already violated the human boundary. Because as already mentioned a while ago by our esteemed undersecretaries, even plastic, and specifically microplastic, has now been detected in our bloodstream, flowing in our bloodstream. There are recent studies, plastic already embedded in our guts, and now even detectable in the brain. And I'm sure later on we have colleagues from the medical community that we can talk more about the specific health impacts of plastic. You can see here a diagram. Every organ system of our body is susceptible to insults, injuries due to plastic. And, we're concerned about people having heart attacks because of clogged arteries due to plastic. We are concerned about people even having lower IQ. It will affect our cognitive ability because microplastic becomes embedded in our brains. And so how can we make sure that we have a plastic-free world and a plastic-free generation and plastic-free bodies in the years and decades to come? So that is perhaps one of our greatest challenges of our time. And so when the planetary boundary and the human boundary are both violated by plastic, we cannot anymore silo our approach that we're only focusing on human health or we're only focusing on the planet's health. We need a planetary health approach that really looks at the nexus and that develops integrated and holistic approaches to addressing the issues at the intersection. So we all need to become doctors for both people and the planet. And, I'm from the health sector. I'm a physician by training. We have friends here from the health sector, but we need to work across sectors as well. In fact, this is the boundary that we need to be crossing over, right? The disciplinary and sectoral boundaries that divide us. We need to work with the urban planners who design our cities. We need to work with people from the food sector, because many of our food products are using enormous amounts of plastic for food packaging. And all of us need to work together so that we can collectively achieve and jointly achieve our shared human health and environmental objectives, healthy people and healthy planet. This should be our approach to addressing plastic. And that's why, a while ago it was mentioned, I also convened Planetary Health Philippines. We invite you to join our growing community. We are intersectoral, interdisciplinary, international, and even intergenerational. From the young to the young at heart, we all have a role to play in addressing the planetary health crisis of our times, including plastic pollution. And in our work towards addressing plastics and planetary health overall, we need to make sure that, we are advocating and we are in solidarity and activism, and we use justice, the value of justice, as our guiding compass. When we talk about plastics and health, it's not just a technological or a technical issue. Ultimately, it is an issue of health justice, because who are affected by plastic pollution? The poor, those who are living in payatas and in Smoky Mountain and in areas where plastic waste is being stored and piled up. But also, it's an issue of environmental justice. It's an issue of climate justice, because again, I mentioned briefly the connections between climate and plastic. And I will even add here intergenerational justice, because we have a responsibility as well to the future generations, those who are yet to be born. And so I invite us all, and I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, are advocates here. That's why we're here in this convening commemorating World Environment Day. But we need to make sure that in our work, justice is at the very heart, at the very core. And when we talk about plastics or even climate change or any planetary health challenge, we cannot just focus on the cosmetic changes. Oh, let's let's stop using our plastic straws, right? Or let's now change our use of single-use plastics. Of course, these are important. These are the first steps. But ultimately, we need to have a real discussion about the current economic system that is addicted to plastic, that prioritizes profit, and that does not center people and planet. Because that is the only way to truly get rid our planet and its people of all these kinds of pollutions and the Ds that I mentioned: destruction, disability, etc. We need to rethink the economic system in which we operate. And I wonder if we have economic students in the room, but all of us who took Economics 101 were introduced to this graph, right? That the economy is represented by this limitless line, that we can keep on consuming and producing and polluting without recognizing that there are planetary boundaries that cannot be violated, and that there is no such thing as an infinite economic growth line or curve. And instead, we need to shift towards this, thinking, and I'm showing to you the donut economy concept, recognizing that we have a planetary boundary, that the economy cannot produce things that will violate the boundaries, while at the same time, we need an economy that centers people and that makes sure that everyone lives healthy and happy lives. And that is the inner part of the donut, as you can see. Again, we have the external circle of the donut. We cannot go beyond the planet's boundaries. And we have the inner circle of the donut. We need to make sure we don't have shortfalls. We don't go below what is necessary for human health, well-being, and survival. So I want to end this opening talk, and I look forward to the more technical and detailed discussions later. This is more to really make us rethink and to provide the guiding principles for our discussion. Planetary health is about planetary humility. It invites us to shift away from this ego-logical perspective. Oh, we human beings are at the top of the pyramid of nature. We can keep on mining, polluting, producing plastic, contaminating our waterways with plastic, and consuming and overproducing and killing. And instead, we need to shift towards a truly ecological approach, where we human beings live in harmony, in greater solidarity and interdependence with all creatures great and small, and with all the other components of planet Earth, our one and only home. And finally, I think that being a planetary health doctor, right, or professional or advocate, is about becoming a good ancestor. What we want is that in 2125, which is 100 years from now, the children of 2125 will read the history books, will look back to the past, And they will say that all of us in this Zoom call in 2025 became good ancestors to them because we made the right decisions, not only for our health and well-being and survival, but also for theirs as well. Because we made sure that we stopped using plastic and did not pass it on to their generation that imperils their survival and well-being. So are we ready to be good ancestors and not selfish ancestors to these children and to the future children of the Philippines and of the world who are yet to come and who are yet to be born? So together, let's advance the health of people and the planet. Thank you very much. And again, happy World Environment Day.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Renzo Gento, for this truly thought-provoking and heart-striking message. Your keynote has beautifully reminded us that planetary health is not just a new term, it's in fact a timeless wisdom. As you said, while we wore face masks during the COVID-19 pandemic to protect ourselves, Mother Earth has long been suffocating, wearing her own kind of mask from the ecological scars of plastic pollution. And while listening to Dr. Renzo, we were especially struck by your framing of how plastic destruction weaves a web of D effects, the destruction, disruption, and death, not just in ecosystems, but also the foundations of our health. And the way you connected this with our consumption patterns, our technological leaps, and even our values and worldviews encourages all of us to reflect deeply. And truly, we cannot continue to pursue infinite consumption from finite resources without facing consequences. And today, thank you for your words. We are reminded that we all have a role to play in healing both people and planet together. So moving forward to the discussions, let's talk first about the impacts of the plastic life cycle, especially with how plastics affect our health. Leading this discussion is our partner from Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia. A round of applause for Dr. Michelle Reyes.
Hi, good morning. So, for few first speakers who came from the government, so Undersecretary Maestral and Assistant Secretary Kaankan, and then coming from the academia by Dr. Renzo. Now, I will be talking about what is the role of civil society in our engagement with relevant sectors such as the health sector in tackling plastic pollution. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So, similar to Dr. Renzo, I'm also a medical professional. So I'm a family medicine resident currently, but I'm also working with Healthcare Without Harm as our sustain what we do in Healthcare Without Harm. So we are an international NGO with several offices, including Southeast Asia, based in the Philippines. So our mission is to champion people's right to health and healthy environment and leading the health sector in transformation in the region towards climate resilience, decarbonization, and sustainability. While our vision is to transform the health sector and becomes a community anchor for sustainability and a leader for the global movement for environmental health and justice, including the plastic pollution. So I just want to highlight our program, Sustainability in Healthcare, wherein we engage with governments, healthcare organizations, and other stakeholders, such as other civil society organizations and sectors as well, to drive sustainability initiatives, such as in procurement or supply chain. I just want to highlight some of the activities that we have done in tackling plastic pollution and waste. So we also support healthcare facilities in conducting their plastic and waste audit and supporting advocacies and campaigns in other healthcare organizations, health professionals and champions for us to tackle the plastic pollution. We had several conferences and even podcasts for the wider audiences and engagement in the Global Plastics Treaty. So this is in line with our three pillars, which is climate adaptation, mitigation, and plastics. So now I just want to highlight what is the challenges right now. So aside from what is being mentioned by the previous speakers, so 3 out of 10 environmental risks worldwide, and 13 million deaths globally are linked to environmental risk, while exposure to unsafely managed water, inadequate sanitation, and poor hygiene. I'm sorry, can you hear me clearly? I'm seeing that um, my screen is on your end it's lagging. Hello, Evan. Am I good?
Oh, yes, yes, Dr. Reyes. Sometimes it's a bit laggy, but
Okay.
you're okay right now.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Now, so as mentioned, so overall, our plastic production has been exploding globally and is expected to triple by 2025. And in relation to that, around 90% of our marine litters are collected in Manila Bay were plastics. Hence, the need for an urgent action for stricter policy implementation. So as you will see here in the graphics, is that if we continue with what we are going right now, there will be more fishes in the ocean by 2050. And almost all of plastics are a combination of oil and chemicals, creating pollution and emitting greenhouse gases throughout their life cycle. And with the toxic chemicals, of course, it is compounding are another present challenges. And the health sector, specifically the global medical plastics market, is also exploding, hence compounding this problem in the next 5 years. For the next slide is the global attention on plastic pollution largely centers around plastics used in consumer products such as packaging and single-use wrappers. However, the contribution of the health sector, a pillar of life-saving services, cannot be understated in this crisis. So if you can click on next so you can see the graphics, is that in terms of scope 3 emissions, the supply chain of the health sector is around 70% of what we are emitting in terms of greenhouse gas emission. And then if you will also click next on the graphics, is that in the recent report by Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, so Southeast Asia's health sector also is also contributing to this problem because of our reliance on single-use plastics, which are used in disposable syringes, IV bags, PPEs, and packaging materials. Hence, the irony is striking. So the very materials designed to protect human health are now posing significant threats to it, hence exacerbating the struggles of hospitals to manage their plastic waste even years after the pandemic. So if you will see in the World Health Organization report on the COVID-19 pandemic, we have overlooked our dependence on single-use plastic and have compounded the convenience and the sanitary of single-use plastic influenced by the industry propagated myth of these plastic being safe and hygienic. Next slide is that, as mentioned by Dr. Renzo, we are facing a triple planetary crisis. So how does plastic pollution threaten public health and planetary health? So in 2023, plastic production was estimated to contribute around 3.7% of the greenhouse gas emission. And unless significant changes are made, so we are expected to triple. And this has a huge significant impact because the contribution of plastic in the carbon emissions are equivalent to 78 coal-fired power plants operating continuously. In terms of chemical pollution, so there are reports that over 16,000 chemicals are used in the plastics life cycle, and in which only 4,200 in which more than 4,200 are of concern due to their persistence, toxicity, and their tendency to bioaccumulate. And we don't have any international regulations and vital hazard data for over 10,000 chemicals that are posing unknown risk to human health. And as mentioned, in terms of biodiversity, so as if we continue what we are doing right now and we do not take action, so there will be more plastic that will choke our rivers, oceans, and lakes than fish by 2050. Next is, how does plastic pollution threaten human health? So there are threats directly and indirectly because of our exposure to the hazards from using plastic products. For example, from chemicals and microplastics that are being used in our patient care. Despite the advertising that stresses the importance of plastics in healthcare, exposure to medical devices and even from exposure from extraction up to disposal are part of the problem. And the risk from our exposure from chemicals, microplastics, and toxin at all cycles or at all life cycle of plastic, they usually affect the low income and the disadvantaged communities globally. Next slide. I just want to share this article in terms of how the health sector is contributing to this problem. So over the past 60 years, the healthcare systems globally have become increasingly dependent on the material virtues of single-use plastic products because of its moldability, flexibility, and disposability. And plastic related to medical product is not a minor part of our plastic pollution problem. So in this article, the global medical plastics market is forecast to increase from 26 to $41 billion in the next 5 years. So this explosive growth is driven primarily by our demand for single-use medical devices, in which PVC or polyvinyl chloride is a problematic plastic, is still the most widely used medical plastic. Next is, I'm going to share an article in which this has already busted the myth that single-use plastic are the solution because of its infection prevention association. The author's possibility may be a solution, but broad-scale, unfettered, and irrational adoption of disposable items in the name of infection prevention is harmful, unsustainable, and unacceptable. For the next slide, now here, currently we have this global plastics treaty that is happening right now. And this is where we can assert our voices, and the health sector in general can address the problem of plastic pollution. Pollution of plastic is for welfare and human health, sustainable development and clean and healthy world, and for medical care. And they are using the health sector as a loophole for them to still produce plastic. And an implication is that subjecting the health products to the treaty's binding requirements, such as phase out of chemicals and polymers of concern, would threaten the provision of safe and effective healthcare. And that risk outweighs the potential harmful impacts to health across the life cycle of those products. And with this narrative, with the expansion that they are planning, so we are on track to get much worse, given that I mentioned that 70% of the health sector's greenhouse gas emission comes from the supply chain, including medical devices, plastic products from the packaging as well. Next slide is, so what is the role of the health sector in all of this? So we are in the position to advocate for a health-centric plastic Treaty to end plastic pollution, the objective of the Global Plastics Treaty in the first place. Hence, healthcare without harm, in coordination with relevant ministries of health and environment, and even civil society organization, the health sector has been fighting for us to be engaged into this plastic treaty, and to not exempt the health sector for medical and health use of plastics in the draft treaty text, because this will impede any work that is already being done on the ground by the health sector. And the problematic narrative that plastics save lives is using the health sector as a loophole for what they want to do in terms of plastic production. Hence, healthcare without harm with the health sector and in coordination with our ministries of health. So we are calling and urging our delegates to develop an ambitious treaty and just treaty to end plastic pollution, including in the health sector. Next slide, please. So it is clear that plastics are responsible for significant harms to human health, the economy, and our environment. Hence, there should be no blanket exemptions for the healthcare, and we must develop an ambitious and just global plastics treaty that addresses plastic pollution without exempting us. Instead, help us engage in this treaty, because health must be at the heart of the treaty. And while the health sector may require a special consideration, a blanket exemption would stall a movement away from single-use and toxic plastic and hinder innovation, research, and impede adoption of a safer and more sustainable alternatives. So here, medical products must not be included. Currently, with the risk that Article 19 on health might not be included, hence the fight is still not over. In addition, we need to strengthen health in relevant articles for us to operationalize health by following the principles I've been supporting. So the plastic pollution must be for the health sector and urging special consideration, and there must be a just and equitable risk and plastics, and these toxification should be prioritized. Hence, transparency and of information for plastic products and materials, and the full life cycle of plastic must be considered. So here are some of the toolkits and reference materials Healthcare Without Harm has developed. And through our work in coordination with other civil society organizations and relevant voices from the health sector. Next slide, please. So we have finally seen that our country, the Philippines, is recognizing that plastic pollution crisis as a health crisis. So I just want to highlight that we are only the Southeast Asian country that signed an indispensable elements for an effective treaty. And because our Ministry of Health is active and engaging in the Global Plastics Treaty, so they also supported a standalone article on health. But as I mentioned, the fight is still not over. So this upcoming August is the next INC, or the second INC 5. Hence, we are still working with stakeholders and with you here. Your voices also matter, so that our ministries of health and environment, who are delegates to the Global Plastics Treaty, will see how we are recognizing the plastic pollution crisis as a health crisis. So what can you as individuals or members of organizations and healthcare facilities do in terms of helping us bring our voices to the Global Plastics Treaty? Next slide, please. So Healthcare Without Harm, we have an open letter in which over 18 million health professionals globally has supported, and more than 1,000 individual physicians and health professionals has supported our open letter with the principles applied that I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. So if you want to sign up or urge your healthcare facilities, your organizations to sign up for us to have a health-centric global plastics treaty because this is a critical moment for us to influence the direction of the treaty. Please share this open letter. It is still up for signing, and we will share your voices in the Global Plastics Treaty this August. So I think the next slide will be my last slide, so you can get involved in healthcare without harm and partner with us in any activities related to plastic pollution and even climate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle Reyes, for the powerful and deeply reflective presentation. You've helped us see the irony that lies at the heart of the plastic crisis in healthcare, that the very tools meant to protect and heal, like PPEs and syringes, are now contributing to a global health threat through plastic pollution. It's a sobering reality that while we save lives, we may be compromising the planet that sustains all life. So let us not allow the health sector to be a loophole for plastic overuse, but rather a lighthouse for sustainable health protective practices. Thank you, Dr. Reyes, for showing us how the healthcare community can rise as a powerful voice in the fight to end plastic pollution, and how you've invited the participants today in how they can also share in this fight for against plastic pollution and how they can act as well. Thank you so much for that. So as we move forward, let us now know more about the chemicals found in plastics and its effect on our human bodies. Sharing his knowledge on the matter, Silliman University, let's all welcome for Dr. Jorge Manuel.
Thank you. Unfortunately, my video is still trying to download, so you might not be able to see me, but I will go ahead and share my slides. So first of all, I'd like to thank Greenpeace, Healthcare Without Harm, Planetary Health Philippines, and the people who support who've been supporting this webinar. So my presentation will focus on the my presentation will focus on the chemicals in plastics and their implications for health, and also on recycling. I'm trying to see. Let's see if this can everybody see my slides? Oh, I see. Okay, I need to fix this a second. Okay, there you go. All right. So let's begin with the chemical composition of plastics. Plastics are made of chemical building blocks called polymers. Polymers are long-chain molecules of repeating units, which come from fossil fuels. The graphic shows the ethylene repeating unit to the left of the arrow, and a portion of the long-chain polymer called polyethylene to the right. But it is important to know that plastic products are not just the polymers, they include many more chemicals. So most polymers by themselves produce very poor products. To make useful products, many chemicals have to be added. Here are some examples of the types of chemical additives to improve the properties of plastic. For example, plasticizers are needed to make plastic softer or more flexible. A flexible plastic product may contain between 10 to 70% by weight of the plasticizer. On the right column are examples of plasticizers. All the ones I chose to list here are endocrine disruptors. That is, they mimic or they alter the effects of hormones in our bodies, and so they can cause adverse health impacts like increasing the risks of certain cancers, reproductive disorders, and developmental problems in children. DEHP, in particular, has been linked to cardiovascular disease. The most recent New York University study estimated about 350,000 cardiovascular deaths globally due to exposure to DEHP in plastics for people around the world. Polymers are very flammable, so between 3 to 25% of the weight of a plastic product are flame retardants to prevent plastics from igniting. PBDE, flame retardants, polybrominated diphenyl ethers, are associated with thyroid disruption, impaired cognitive and motor impairment in children, and possible reproductive effects. Other additives are also used to make plastics stronger, such as impact modifiers, to prevent them from degrading from exposure to oxygen or exposure to the sun or to microbes, etc. Most of the chemicals listed here, such as the antioxidants, benzotriazoles, squats, etc., are all very toxic, not just to humans, but to wildlife. The previous slide listed additives to improve the properties of plastics, but a wide range of chemicals are also used to aid in the processing of plastics, such as desiccants to remove moisture, agents to prevent the buildup of static, heat stabilizers to prevent decomposition during the processing, lubricants, etc. Most of these, such as the lead-containing stabilizers and organic tins, which are toxic, remain with the plastic and have their own health impacts. Other additives include nonstick agents to make plastics more resistant to water or to stains. Many of the nonstick agents are parent polyfluoroalkyl substances, better known as PFAS, also better known as the forever chemicals, which don't break down for hundreds of years and are now found in our soils, water, and in the human body, and are linked to cancer, reproductive disorders, effects on the immune system, and other health impacts. Moreover, plastic products often contain tiny amounts of unreacted monomers, many of which are toxic, and also a large number of so-called non-intentionally added substances, or NIAS, NIAS, which include impurities in the additives or breakdown products during manufacturing and also during use. All told, as Dr. Michelle mentioned, a total of 16,323 chemicals are used in plastic. Of this number, 4,219 chemicals have known hazard properties, such as causing cancer, genetic mutations, reproductive harm, endocrine disruption, damage to the kidney or liver, etc. But equally disturbing is the fact that 10,726 of those chemicals used in plastics have little information or no information at all on their hazard properties. So let's take the case of food contact plastics. About 12,000 chemicals are used for making food-grade plastics. Many of the chemicals migrate from the plastics into food or drink or water. And of the chemicals approved for use in food, many have never been tested, or the toxicity data is limited, and even chemicals with known hazards have been authorized in food-grade plastics. For example, let's look at melamine footwear. Studies have shown that melamine, its derivatives, and cyanuric acid migrate out of melamine plastic and into the food. As the graph shows, the migration of these chemicals is worse if the food is hot or if the food is acidic, or if the food is placed in a microwave. The health effects of these chemicals include kidney problems, male reproductive effects, and also these chemicals are known to transfer to breast milk. A study in 2022 showed that 60% of pregnant mothers in the US already have melamine and cyanuric acid detected in their urine, especially Hispanic and Black mothers who are probably more exposed to melamine due to their lower income. So melamine plates, cups, bowls are sold all over the Philippines. Many people microwave their food in melamine, including acidic foods like paksiw, sinigang, adobo, fritada, all the foods with tomato or vinegar. Now, so far, we've talked about the chemicals in the making of plastics and the chemicals that are released during use. But when plastic becomes waste, more chemicals are added as chemical pollutants from the environment stick to plastic waste. Most plastics are lipophilic, that is, they attract lipophilic pollutants such as PCBs, pesticides, DDT, polynuclear aromatics, etc., from the environment. This slide shows examples of toxic like lipophilic substances in the environment that absorb on microplastics and their known health effects. Now, what does this all mean for recycling? Because of the toxic chemicals in plastic products and on plastic waste, recycling, sadly, has become an avenue for, in effect, spreading more toxic contamination. One study analyzed recycled polyethylene pellets from recycling plants in 13 countries and found 491 chemical compounds in them, including 162 pesticides and biocides, 89 pharmaceuticals, 65 industrial chemicals, etc. All this means we must find a way to make recycling better, safer. Besides, we cannot rely on recycling as the solution to the plastics crisis. These are the common plastics, the most commonly, the most commodity plastics, or they're the most common plastics produced at high volume: polyethylene terephthalate or PET, HDPE, polyvinyl chloride, etc. But there are many more plastics as shown here. And in reality, out of all these types of plastics, only these three types of plastics can be recycled in practice and at scale. The vast majority of plastics cannot be recycled. This diagram gives us the bigger picture. It shows what has happened to all the plastics produced from 1950 to 2015. Out of 8.3 billion tons produced, 5.8 billion tons have become waste, of which 4.6 billion tons went to our dump sites, rivers, beaches, mountains, agricultural lands, the ocean, and elsewhere in the environment. 700 million tons were incinerated or burned, producing more toxic materials. And only 500 million tons were recycled. But of this small amount, 300 million were then, after recycling, used once and then discarded again into the environment, and 100 million were used once and then burned. Only this small, tiny sliver depicted by this green line are recycled plastics that remain in use. In other words, no amount of recycling can solve the global plastic crisis. To protect people and the planet, we need to drastically reduce our production and consumption of plastics to sustainable levels. We need to eliminate non-essential single-use plastics. We need to use safer and more sustainable alternatives and systems, find safer chemical additives for essential use plastics, and promote chemical simplification. And we need to redesign all products to be safe, sustainable, while allowing reuse, repair, refurbishment, and safe recycling. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel, for enlightening us about the toxics in plastic life cycle. That indeed, even from how plastics were made, from the polymers that they were made of, and even down to the part wherein we are consuming them, and down to the part as well that we are trying to discard them, and even for recycling, that numbers and studies have shown that recycling in itself is not even effective. In fact, it even poses more threat, not just to the ecological ecosystem, but also most importantly to our human health. Thank you so much for giving that insightful and very informative presentation. So if you have questions, please send them through the Q&A tab on Zoom so we can get to those after the presentations. Now that we've heard about the health impacts of the plastic pollution crisis, let's talk about solutions. To start us off by showing how the healthcare sector can reduce plastic, let's hear from the Executive Director of Mary Johnston Hospital, Dr. Glenn Roy Paraso.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm just checking if we're online. Can everybody see me?
Yes, we can see you, Dr. Glenn.
I so very impressive lineup of speakers. So much so that we are able to get that ecosystem of how plastics really affect our health. Um, I'd like to start off with thanking everybody, especially the organizers of this webinar, Healthcare Without Harm, Peace, Planetary Health, and all of these other uh, advocates. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me. Um, Mary Johnson Hospital itself has become an advocate for the greening of hospitals. We started 1906, we were established, and we're on our 119th year right now. And we thought in 2016 that it would be a very good initiative for us to go and look at sustainability of health. And from a health facility standpoint, we thought that we would continue on and see what are the initiatives in looking at health and quality health care for our people. So the plastics reduction initiative, so I am on the practicing side, uh, started during that time. Our next slide will just show us what the highlights are of what we're going to talk about now. I do hope that it's just going to be quick, right? We'll have plastics overview, plastics in health, plastics in the environment, our initiatives, and the lessons that we've learned so far. Um, I was part of the last plastics treaty advocacy with that group. And we do hope that we continue on. And I'd like to thank Healthcare Without Harm for letting me become part of that the activity. Exciting. So policy towards plastics was being talked about specifically for medical use. And it's true that Dr. Mitch was saying we should not take out plastics out of medical use. They should also be looked at and be controlled and reduced. I also would like to thank Dr. George Emmanuel for sharing with us with really what the effects are of plastics. And we don't even know how technical the names are. And there's a lot of this really hidden in the plastics that we're using. Um, our next slide just shows us that plastic pollution has really been at a global level at this point now. So we're looking at a million tons, and China is leading us there. And regionally, for oceans, and I think this has been shared also, we are the top. The Philippines being an archipelagic country, we have polluted 356,371 tons of metric tons of plastics, and we have really been just throwing our garbage into the waters around us. And the effects of this really have uh, made our ecosystem and biodiversity with it was shared to us a while ago with our DENR executive that they are already leaching into the ground and also leaching into the waters and into the fish and other the animals in the water, right? And we're already eating all of this. So I remember in another slide that I shared that the Laguna Lake Development Authority has found out in their research that tilapia and all of the fishes already have microplastics in them. So even as we throw plastics as garbage into our waters, we're actually eating them also and ingesting them. So it's really hard for us to look at this. And these plastics just come back and haunt us, both physically and with our health. So just to give you a sense of how much plastics we've been talking about, this next slide will show us what we're getting at. And other speakers have talked about this, but if you will see what 5 grams is of plastic every week, and we've been living for a regular person would have lived for 60, 70 years. And if you're doing that every week, you have 52 weeks, you can imagine how much plastic really is in your body. And it was said already a while ago, earlier even in the overview, that it is causing cancer and it is changing hormonal activity in our bodies. And its associated chemicals are at a monetary cost of 920 billions globally. If you would look at how tall, supposedly, how tall these plastics are, the equivalent of this would be, in the next slide, our inhalation over a human lifetime, it says over a year, um, you would have the height of 12.69 meters of inhaled plastics. And over a lifetime, the height of the Eiffel Tower. And that's the minimum. And the maximum would be the Snowdon Mountains in Wales. So that's 1,000 meters of plastics that we've been inhaled if you look at the height. So just to give you a visual context of how things are. And again, a lot of this is very much inconclusive, and meaning the studies on how it affects us. But there have been initial connections already with the various cancers and hormonal activities and disruptions that's happening. So I guess even before the pandemic, this might even kill us faster than a pandemic. Right. Our next slide will just show us that these plastic products account for, and this was shared also by Mitch, 3.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And the plastics by 2050 would account for 20% of our total oil consumption. You know that plastics are a derivative of oil, right? So lower down the chain, when gasoline is produced, right? Lower down the chain is asphalt and plastics. It's 15% of our global carbon emissions. So imagine all of this happening all at the same time, simultaneously. So it's really an attack on the health, it's an attack on the environment and the living planet that we are in. Our next slide will just show us what we've been doing with our strategic directions at Mary Johnson Hospital. We looked at 2016 and started our strategic directions for the next 100 years. And we thought that this would be our pathway. We would be starting at 2020 to becoming a green hospital. That's why we're really already a part of the GGHH, the Global Green and Healthy Hospitals. We would like to look at 2025 to 2070 with ISO certifications for 1401 for health and safety and 9001 for quality management systems. By 2095, we would have a plastics-less facilities in Tondo, and hopefully by 2120, 100 years since 2020, we would have a fully integrated health system where we consider plastics as something that is in the center of our management of the environment and health in patients in our hospital. For MGH initiatives, what the process has been is the next slide. We usually start off with, and we started off with our partnerships and our green and safe hospital policy. So deriving from the DOH call for safety hospitals, for safe hospitals, we did our own hospital policy on a green and safe hospital policy. And then we got the board to buy in as much as management and staff after that policy was made. Also, we went into partnerships with different institutions and NGOs in order to continue on with advocating for our green hospitals. We started off with our green team composition, and we had a work plan with this team from the different departments. And we completed this work plan and are subsequently implementing already the different activities of this work plan, which will be cited in the next slide. So we started off with healthcare without harm, hand holding us with our waste audit. And quite recently, we have gotten gross savings on our proper management of infectious wastes. In 2019 and 2022, we had a baseline. We had initial savings from that. This is just one day in 2019 and 2022 of 79,000 pesos from our infectious wastes. And because of that, we are looking at continuing on now on a regular basis, hopefully as often as every month, looking at our indicators for waste audits. The other thing that we have just launched recently, and I've shared this already in our recent meetings, is that with Euromed, we are starting off with a MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, and with a project entitled RTG, for Return to Glass, RTG. So with Euromed, we have started this, and as of the last year, we have already savings of from Euromed. Hold on, let me check that. Euromed, we have already savings already of 5%, or what we have come up with is that to shift back to glass at 5% per annum. So our latest savings is that we're looking at 5% savings every year until year 5, wherein we would have already 100% shifted back to glass. If you can see here that we have calculated that plastic, and this is from our research, costs 0.28 kilograms of carbon dioxide production, and glass, which is 1.6 kilograms. However, if you will see the difference is that in glass, if we have a high carbon dioxide production of 1.6 kilograms, we will be able to infinitely recycle our glass. Wherein with plastics at 0.28, even if it's low, we are just piling this up until it reaches 1.6 kilograms and beyond, and we will not be able to recycle this. For the second is that where we have in the pandemic time, another initiative that we did was to reprocess our PPEs. So we did that with autoclaving our PPEs. We were able to use them for 2 to 3 times, and our gross savings for proper reprocessing of our PPEs came out to 10,103,000 during that pandemic period. Because if you will remember, we all were searching for PPEs, and it was too expensive for all of us to get PPEs. It was even on the black market during that time. And because of that, we thought of recycling and autoclaving our PPEs for 2 times, and then after which we threw them away. The last initiative was to look at energy and renewable energies and hospital lighting and fixtures retrofitting. And as of this moment, we have already saved 9.4 millions of pesos from our solar PV harvest. And just let me get at how much we've saved with our climate and carbon emissions. Yeah, from our carbon emissions. Great. So in with our carbon emissions, I'm sorry, we were able to save 370,000 kilograms or kilotons of carbon emissions, with an equivalent of 11,000 planted trees for the last 3 years, 2022 up till the present. So you can see that with renewable energy, we have shifted from getting at 22% of our energy needs. And we have shifted this also, the savings, to diagnosis and treatment of HIV/AIDS, indigent patients, and tuberculosis patients. So if this goes on, we will be able to come out with a very good, I should say, shift in using our health equities using renewable energies. Our next slide will just show us that our lessons would look at both financial planning, which is an intentional budget for the program, because this is something new, and the buy-in of our management and board should be continuous so that we should show them an accountability of what's happening, the engagement of our staff from all departments so that everybody goes on and looks at one way. A continuing communications campaign for looking at what are the results already, and then a sustainability mechanism for reporting, monitoring, and evaluating the different initiatives that we've been doing here at Mary Johnston Hospital. And are inconvenience, but they have as really what we would say is an inconvenience. And because of that, I set our closing that the inconvenience of plastics use should be reversed before it brings us to an extinction level event. In a quite recent um, film, which is a deep impact. They called it an ELE, wherein the asteroids are going to strike Earth. But I think this could be the same thing with plastics, wherein humans could really come at an extinction level event if we don't do anything about our plastics now and reduce them. So there you have it. Thank you for the time. We do hope that we contributed to these discussions. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Paraso, for the truly inspiring and solutions-driven presentation. You've shown us that hospitals like Mary Johnston Hospital can do more than just heal the sick. They can lead systemic change that heals our planet too. And these are not just numbers that you have shown to us, Doctor. They're proof that sustainability is scalable, smart, and economically sound. I would just like to add on what Dr. Michelle Reyes have emphasized earlier, that the healthcare sector must not become a loophole. In fact, as your leadership has shown, it can become a lighthouse of innovation and accountability. Thank you, Dr. Paraso, for showing us that green hospitals are not only possible, they are in fact already here. Let's carry your message forward and continue advocating for climate-smart, health-centered, and plastic-free hospitals in every community. Maraming salamat po. So now we have heard about the healthcare sector, but what about addressing the plastic crisis in different countries and across sectors? Sharing about upstream solutions that address the crisis at source, we have Miriam Ledesma from Greenpeace Philippines.
Thank you, Evan. Let me just share my screen here. I hope everybody can see my screen clearly.
Yes, Ms. Marian, we can see your screen.
All right, so today we heard about plastic's impact on human health, and as more data comes in, we're seeing the true cost of the plastic crisis. So what we're seeing and what we know is that every stage of plastic's life, its entire life cycle, not only negatively affects human and environmental health, but it also contributes to climate change. It aggravates social inequities, contaminates our food systems, and disrupts economies and livelihoods in different countries around the world. Low-income and marginalized groups are disproportionately affected by plastic pollution, as we've heard from the previous speakers. And these include waste workers, women, fisher folk, indigenous peoples, and also fence line communities living near production facilities. The economic burden on countries is also disproportionate and very significant, with potential losses reaching up to $2.5 trillion annually, and plastic pollution costing low-income countries or developing countries 10 times more than wealthy nations. And that's pretty ironic when you think about it, because the plastic consumption per capita in wealthy nations are way higher than low-income states. Now, unfortunately, the situation will become worse because plastic production is still growing. Plastic production has reached over 460 million tons in 2019, which doubled in volume from the year 2000. And half of all that plastic that was produced was designed for single use. And half of that is still being designed for single use, basically throwaway plastics that were used once and then thrown away right after. Now, the Philippines and other countries are continuing to struggle with plastic pollution, primarily because companies insist on producing single-use plastics and using these plastics for their products and packaging. So what do we need to do to address the plastic crisis as a whole and effectively? Well, there are three things. Because of that, we really do have three interventions that needs to be done to address the root of the problem. And that's overproduction of plastics and corporate dependence on single-use plastics. So we need reduction, reuse, and accountability measures for producers and companies. Now, you can think of these as upstream solutions that address the plastic crisis at the beginning before plastic can create so many other problems. Now, first, for reduction, reducing plastic production and use is essential for addressing this particular crisis. Reduction curbs the flow of plastics into our communities, into our economies. And that means less pollution and less health harms from plastic production, plastic use, and plastic disposal. It will also mean that there's less toxic exposure from all the chemicals in plastics, and it decreases energy and resource consumption, including the use of fossil fuels, which, as one person mentioned, makes up 99% of the plastics that we use today. Now, when we look at different plastic reduction policies and measures, they're becoming more and more common. Countries which have certain bans or have banned certain single-use plastics include Rwanda, Chile, Bangladesh, and the 27 countries in the European Union. And that's just to name a few. We're getting more and more countries that are starting to ban single-use plastics. And it's also not something that's unfamiliar for the Philippines, where there are over 500 local governments and national agencies that have already started to ban or restrict single-use plastics. Now, for the second solution, we have just transitioned to reuse and refill systems. And you might wonder what these are or if there's something new, but actually reuse and refill were the norm before plastics were introduced. Reuse refers to systems and practices that enable repeated use of packaging and products for the same purpose that they were created. And these packaging and products were designed to last for a minimum number of rotations or uses. Now, when you look at all of these examples that you have, we have Greenpeace's Huwa sa Tingin project, we have EJF's Bottle-Free Seas in Bangkok, as well as other examples in Jakarta, in India, and other countries around the world. You're seeing that communities and cities are actually showing or proving that these solutions are possible. And robust and reuse refill systems can not only decrease plastic production, but they also decrease resource consumption and waste while promoting sustainable consumption for all users. And last but not the least, of course, is accountability of producers and companies. This definitely is essential. Our governments and our policies must hold producers and companies accountable. As the makers and providers of plastics, particularly single-use plastics, corporations and industries have a responsibility to change their destructive and harmful business operations. They also have a responsibility to provide consumers with the right alternatives, like reuse and refill, which are safe, affordable, and accessible for everybody. So how do we go about making this happen, making all of these solutions a reality? And it can't be done on an individual level. It definitely has to be done by our government and corporations, because this systemic issue will require systemic changes and at-scale solutions. Now, this can happen through policy and legal frameworks. As mentioned earlier, UN member states are currently negotiating a global plastics treaty, and the next one will be in August. Now, part of this treaty has different kinds of articles or provisions that are included in the agreement between all of these different countries. To end plastic pollution, to protect our health, our climate, and our communities, there should be key parts or inclusions in this treaty. One of those was mentioned by Michelle earlier, and what I also have focuses on different other articles. For one, we have Article 6, supply. It must include a global target to cut plastic production. A reduction of at least 75% by 2040 is recommended to stay within the planetary boundaries that Doc Renzo mentioned earlier. And this proposal to cut plastic production was actually supported by over 100 countries in the last meeting in Busan. Now, for Article 3, the treaty must reduce and eventually phase out single-use plastics and eliminate harmful plastic products as well as chemicals of concern. And in Article 5, product design, it should develop a process and targets to establish reuse systems and a transition plan to these systems. But of course, overall, what we really need is a treaty that is rooted in human rights, human and environmental health, as well as ensuring a just transition and fair financing mechanisms, particularly for developed countries. But of course, countries and cities don't have to wait for this global plastics treaty. They have started already. And what we're seeing is that national and local governments can set up policies that enable everyday solutions. One of those is national laws that require companies to reduce plastic production. They can also start banning single-use plastics and promoting reusable products. As I mentioned earlier, in the Philippines, there are over 500 local governments and national agencies that have started to ban single-use plastics. And what we need now in this country is a more comprehensive national law to support all of these different efforts. But you might be asking, what about people who need single-use plastics or need access to goods that are in sachets, for example? Now, sachets, which are practically impossible to recycle and contain so many plastic chemicals, are currently being peddled by corporations. But what they can do to provide an alternative is to look into transitioning to reuse and refill. So really, that's where reuse and refill comes in as alternatives to single-use plastics. A law mandating a just transition to reuse and refill systems will ensure that no one is left behind. This law can have targets for companies to transition to single-use plastics by a certain date, to transition from single-use plastics by a certain date, and shift to reuse and refill by that date. It can also mandate companies and different sectors to encourage use of reusables and to provide incentives for use, not only for consumers, but also businesses, and of course, support small businesses. I think one important measure that we need to have is to ensure that affected stakeholders and workers, like waste workers, are part of this just transition to a reuse economy. As we've seen, all of the different impacts really add up to the price of inaction, of not acting on the plastic crisis. And that price is too high, while the benefits of our solutions are quite numerous. So addressing the plastic crisis is really more than just eliminating waste or protecting the environment. But as we learned today, it's also about preventing serious health risks and conditions and addressing injustices across the plastic supply chain. Reduction, reuse, and corporate accountability must start now, and it should start with our government and corporations. So I invite everyone who's here to join us and add your voice to call for a strong global plastics treaty by signing our petition. And if you have any questions or want to support the campaign, you can reach out to Greenpeace Philippines.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Ms. Maren Ledesma, for that impactful and empowering presentation. You reminded us that real change starts at the source. And that means cutting plastic production by over 75%, transitioning toward reuse and refill systems, and holding producers accountable for the waste they create. What's essentially powerful from hearing from you, Ms. Ledesma, is that how you connected individual action to systems level change, and that was so inspiring. So you've shown us how national and local policies must enable solutions to protect both people and the planet. And I was so touched when you put emphasis on putting the part in supporting for small businesses and the inclusion of workers affected by the shift. So thank you, Ms. Marion, for not only shedding light on the true cost of plastic pollution, but also giving us the tools and vision to fight it together. Your message makes it clear a better system is possible and it starts now. So it was great hearing from all these insightful speakers. So to share his thoughts on what's been discussed today, let's hear from Mapua University's Dr. Jake Brian Cortez.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I hope I'm coming in clear. Let me just share my slide. Okay. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat, and being mindful of the time that we have spent for this webinar, I'd like to keep it short but meaningful. It's an honor to join this vital conversation on plastic pollution and human health. The evidence is clear, as mentioned by Dr. Renzo, who inspired me and mentored me into this advocacy, as well as to Dr. Michelle Reyes, who is a part of our advocacy. Microplastics have been found in our water, food, air, and even in our human tissues. In the Philippines, where plastic waste management remains a persistent challenge, these exposures translate to tangible health risks, such as respiratory illnesses from open burning, food and water contamination, and long-term ecological threats affecting community well-being. For family and community medicine physicians, this is not a peripheral issue. It is a frontline health concern. So allow me to share with you the story of Nanay Lina, a 64-year-old grandmother from a coastal barangay in Luzon. She suffered from recurring cough, skin rashes, and stomach problems. These symptoms occurred in the context of her community's environment: open burning of plastic waste near her home, reliance on rainwater catchment, and consumption of seafood from nearby plastic-polluted waters. While a direct clinical link has not been formally established, this reflects a growing pattern of environment-related health risks faced by many Filipino families in similar settings. Nanay Lina's story is not unique. Across our clinics and communities, we witness how plastic pollution silently harms the families we serve. The ecological determinants of health like this shape the daily realities of our patients, and addressing them is now a professional and ethical imperative for us primary care physicians. And so in response, the Philippine Academy of Family Physicians established the Special Interest Group on Planetary Health, which I am privileged to chair. Guided by our PAFP Cares framework, C stands for community engagement, co-developing eco-health initiatives in our barangays. A stands for advocacy, advancing health sector leadership in plastic policy reforms. R stands for research, documenting plastics health impacts in primary care. Education stands for E stands for education, integrating planetary health into medical training and continuous professional development. And lastly, S stands for sustainable healthcare practices, such as reducing clinical plastic use and promoting climate smart and plastic-free care. Our efforts are modest but strategic. Through partnerships with groups like Greenpeace, Healthcare Without Harm, Planetary Health Philippines, and our government allies, we aim to mainstream environmental health in family medicine and primary care. I thank the organizers and fellow panelists for this timely platform. May this dialogue lead to enduring collaboration, protecting both human health and the planet we all depend on. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cortez, for sharing your thoughts about what was discussed by speakers. And thank you for elaborating and telling us about what the cares in your efforts that have been able to stand for along the fight for a plastic crisis and the sustainability practices that you have been imparting in your organization and to others. So lastly, to share a perspective from the Department of Trade and Industry, National Capital Region Office, let us all welcome Ms. Eden Sulabo on behalf of DDI NCR Director Jay Akar.
Hello, good morning. Good morning to all po. Good morning to our esteemed
Hi, good morning.
organizers, fellow panelists, and distinguished guests. On behalf of the Department of Trade and Industry, National Capital Regional Office, or DTI NCRO Regional Director, it is an honor to participate in this crucial webinar, Toxic or Truths, the Unfiltered Impacts of Plastic on Human. The discussions today have profoundly underscored the escalating plastic crisis, particularly its pervasive impact on our environment, public health, and socio-economic landscape here in the Philippines. From the alarming statistics on single-use plastic consumption to the far-reaching implications across the entire plastic life cycle, it is clear that addressing this challenge demands a paradigm shift from conventional waste management to move transformative upstream solutions. As DTI, we recognize that sustainable economic development must go hand in hand with environmental stewardship and consumer protection. From DTI's perspective, our role is pivotal in fostering an enabling environment for businesses to transition towards more sustainable practices, particularly in mainstreaming reuse and refill systems. We acknowledge the immense potential of these upstream interventions, not only in curbing plastic pollution at its source, but also in creating new economic opportunities and resilient business models. Our vibrant tingi-tingi culture, historically rooted in reuse and refilling, provides a unique foundation upon which modern scalable system can be built. We are committed to exploring policies and incentives that encourage large and medium enterprises, as well as our vital micro and small enterprises, or our MSMEs, to invest in and adopt these innovative approaches, ensuring competitiveness and accessibility for both producers and consumers. The success of mainstreaming reuse and refill system hinges on a robust, fair, and environmentally sound policy framework, coupled with seamless interagency collaboration. DTI stands ready to work closely with regulatory bodies like the FDA to establish clear standards for hygiene, safety, and product quality in refilling operations. Our commitment extends to ensuring that businesses are well informed of these guidelines and that consumers are educated on the benefits and proper practices of reuse. By streamlining processes, providing technical assistance, and facilitating dialogues across the value chain, we aim to reduce barriers for adoption and accelerate the widespread acceptance of these sustainable alternatives. In closing, the insights shared today reinforce DTI NCRO's unwavering commitment to championing a circular economy that prioritizes reduction, redesign, and reuse. We believe by embracing these upstream solutions, we can collectively mitigate the detrimental impacts of plastic, foster a more responsible business ecosystem, and ultimately secure a healthier and more sustainable future for all Filipinos. We call upon all stakeholders, from manufacturers and retailers to consumers and policymakers, to join us in this transformative journey. Thank you po. Thank you for inviting us to this webinar.
Wow, thank you so much, Ms. Eden, for sharing the Department of Trade and Industry's report for sustainable solutions. It is heartening to hear that the DTI is ready to collaborate with other government agencies in making the shift away from plastic more inclusive, especially for small business owners navigating the transition from puha sa tingi practices to refill and reuse models. Your commitment ensures that this movement is not just ecological, but also economically just and empowering. Maraming salamat po, Ms. Eden, for showing us the government and grassroots can move forward together. So we are opening now the floor for questions. So please use the Q&A function on Zoom for questions, or you may also leave your questions in the chat. Kindly indicate your name, organization, and which panelist you are directing your question to. And if it's a general question, we can address it to the whole panel. So I can see that there have been questions stated in our Q&A tab. And so if I may read the first question that I was able to see, we have a question coming from the audience. This is addressed to Ms. Marian Ledesma. What is the significance of the Global Plastics Treaty, especially for a country like the Philippines? And what is the role of corporations in addressing plastic pollution?
Yes, the plastics treaty is quite significant in terms of addressing plastic pollution because it means that there will be a global agreement that mobilizes not just one country at a time, but also but an entire group of countries that are willing to address the problem. And this means that they can collaborate, work together to create solutions, and also work together on establishing the kind of infrastructure and systems we need at a global level to reduce plastic production and use. When it comes to the Philippines, what matters really is that all of these different initiatives that we're seeing on the ground in the country can also be supported by the right financing mechanisms that the treaty can provide. And it will also mean that they can connect us to other countries that will have technical expertise on reuse, for example, or may have better systems in place to address not only waste management, but creating refill stations or refill models. These kinds of solutions can be supported with collaborative work through the treaty. And at the same time, because we are a sachet economy, having very good provisions in the treaty that, for example, lay out a plan to phase out single-use plastics or lay out a plan to phase out sachets. This will mean that we'll also get the kind of support needed as we transition away from plastics when this treaty happens. In terms of holding corporations accountable, while this treaty obligates different countries and member states of the UN, it will also allow them to basically convert or transform this global agreement into national laws that will hold companies and businesses accountable. So once you have a national law that is transposed from the Plastics Treaty, then you'll be able to require or mandate certain actions from businesses that are operating within your own country.
All right, so thank you for that, Ms. Marian. I hope that the question was able to be answered by Ms. Marian clearly. So moving forward, we have another question, which is from Christian Jake Leona from UP Tacloban College. So his question states, plastics aside, I'd like to ask more about the ignored crisis we are facing at this time. Most of the medical treatments in hospital are introduced through the runoff of cleaning activities for medical procedures. As expected, this contributes to the release of pharmaceutical residues into sewage systems. The first report, an environmental bacterial isolate from the Philippines, Acinetobacter tauneri, showed resistance to last resort antimicrobials used to treat motor drug infections. Even if these medicines are stored in organic materials, still introduction of medicine to the environment through sewage water is inevitable. What are the current practices in healthcare that can prevent this crisis? Or has this been overlooked by the healthcare system based on current disinfection and waste disposal practices? So originally, Sir Christian J. Leona addresses this question to Dr. Renzo. However, Dr. Renzo is not here in Zoom anymore, so maybe we could direct this question to Dr. Michelle or Dr. Glenn Paraso. Hello, any of the speakers are welcome to answer this question.
Can I give some thoughts on it, just quickly? I think the issue of microorganisms, highly resistant microorganisms, is both a problem first on the use end. Are we over prescribing, for example, antibiotics and other things in cases where it may not be needed, or it's done using without actually determining which of the antibiotics are specific to would be specific or sensitive to a specific type of infection, as well as on the tail end, which is how are we handling the wastewater issue. I think it needs to be approached from both sides. And I'll just link this to the overall discussion of plastics anyway. Just as in the issue of plastics, we need to look at both what's happening in the front end. Can we reduce the use of material, as well as how then do we manage the waste? But always in cases like this, the most effective approaches would be always to look at the front end, which is why the zero waste hierarchy is an upside down pyramid, so that the very top, the highest priority should be prevention and reduction, whether it's of plastics or whether it's the use of antibiotics in cases where it's not needed and things like that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that information, Doctor. So I hope that question from Sir Christian J. Cleona was able to be answered. So any of our keynote speakers would want to add on to the question, and actually, if none so far, we could move forward to another question. So actually, we have a lot of questions that we can see in our Q&A tab, and I can also see answered questions, right? And I can see already questions about the answered questions were the question of food grade plastic, and Dr. Emmanuel was able to answer that as well. Also, the question from our audience regarding the ongoing efforts or plans to integrate and standardize this topic on plastic toxicity, that in the efforts on integrating it our medical education. And thankfully, this was answered also by Dr. Emmanuel. And so we can entertain another question, and this is from Ron J. Kababan, West Visayas State University, BS Chemistry. The question to the Greenpeace panel. My question is, what are the opportunities for future chemists in the global health movement, and what are the examples of measures applying knowledge in chemistry in eradicating microplastics? Wow, this is indeed a very, very good question. So we can direct this to Ms. Marion, please.
Yeah, I'll try to answer. There are definitely different opportunities in the global health movement as well as the global environmental movement for different chemists and scientists. As we've heard, Dr. Emmanuel is one of those that are helping us really understand and realize the risks of plastics and other environmental issues when it comes not just to our health, but how it also has implications on our environment. And what is great about having different scientists provide these information is that it also makes the recommendations and the actions that we need to do more sound and more thought out. And when it comes to how you can participate or contribute as a future chemist, I think you can already start now by already being engaged in different environmental campaigns as well as health campaigns that you can provide certain expertise and knowledge on to people that you're working with. In terms of applying knowledge in eradicating microplastics, I would defer to Dr. Emmanuel to maybe provide a better answer when it comes to chemistry and eradicating microplastics.
So I'll just put in a few additional thoughts. Thanks, Marianne. For one thing, if you're a chemist, I would urge you very much to look more and more into the field of green chemistry, where we're trying to find more sustainable chemical processes, chemical reagents, and so on. The other things in terms of thinking is I think we need to include this also in the education of our students. And that is, you know, I started as a chemist, and in my training, we were focused on the traditional branches of chemistry, but none of us really thought of looking at things in a life cycle. For example, I worked for the plastics industry for 2 decades. I hate to admit that. And I even developed certain types of polymers, but never during the time did I ever consider what is going to be the ultimate impact of these products or these materials that we're creating. So we need to change our thinking as chemists to look at what will be the impacts of the materials and products that we produce. The other important thing I should also mention is that we need to be interdisciplinary. So in addition to being a chemist, I'm also an engineer. I also eventually became an environmental scientist, and I eventually also moved into public health. So I try to embody what I preach. That is, we need to work across different disciplines, as my friend Dr. Renzo said, because, for example, as a chemist, often you don't think about what are the toxic effects of the products you're using. We need to work with our toxicologists and people in public health and so on. So this is, I think, all is very important, so that what we produce is not only going to be safe, but also sustainable. And that also responds to another question I've been reading, where somebody is saying, what are the opportunities for using other alternatives? Wouldn't they also, biodegradable alternatives, wouldn't they also harm forests if we're doing that? That's precisely the whole point when in the Global Plastics Treaty, often we are saying it needs to be safe, but it also needs to be a sustainable alternative. We have to avoid what we call regrettable substitutions, where we take an alternative and we offer it as supposedly a better thing, and then later we regret it because we didn't look not only at the other toxic effects. That's the case of bisphenol A. We replace it with bisphenol F and bisphenol S, only found out that they're even worse. But we also don't want to replace them with some bioplastics, which may end up using some of the same chemicals, and worse yet, are going to deplete our farms from being used instead for raising food to feed people. So this is where we need to look at the whole thing. It's not just on the science side, we also need to look at the socioeconomic side. How does it impact communities that we're working with? How does it impact the poor? These are some of the points I think that Marianne had also mentioned. So this is just basically a call that we all need to work together with each of different specialties towards building a better, a safer world that we can be proud to have left for our great-grandchildren.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Dr. Emmanuel, for answering that question. And also thank you, Ms. Marian, for answering that question first and foremost. And we can actually cater another 2 questions for now. So I'll be reading another question from our Q&A tab. So unfortunately, our representatives from DENR and DOH are not here in Zoom anymore. So I'll be entertaining questions that are directed to our other panelists or speakers. Okay, so we have a question from Green Convergence Tessa. What do we do with existing plastics? Is upcycling them safe? And how should we manage the plastics that we have now? And I do agree with this question because it was mentioned by our panelists or speakers that recycling is in fact not even efficient. It can also be toxic. So what can we do with the existing plastics that we do have now? Maybe we could direct this question again to Dr. Emmanuel.
This is a very difficult problem. Many of us refer to this about how do we deal with the legacy plastic issue. I don't have an answer for it. It's a serious problem because one of the characteristics of plastics is they're there for many decades to hundreds of years. Worse yet, after many decades, they break down into small microplastics, which then, if they're in the soil, they percolate into the groundwater, they get carried out into the seas. And so it's a very serious problem. We cannot think of also plastics as just being one size, right? Because eventually the environment breaks them down into smaller sizes where they're even more dangerous in many ways. So the other thing I will say, which is the negative thing, is the one thing we should not do with the legacy plastics is burning them or using them for waste to energy, or using some of these so-called new technologies that are supposed to be the solution, such as chemical recycling. There are people saying, let's just take the plastics, burn them because they have a caloric intake, and use it for energy. Well, as it turns out, when you burn plastics, you produce huge amounts of very toxic materials, including dioxins and furans, and particulate matter and so on. So there's that one problem. You also create toxic ash, incidentally, which people are not as conscious of. And the worst thing is, not the worst, another thing is you also produce greenhouse gases. In fact, in studies of waste to energy plants using plastics, it turns out that burning plastics and burning waste in general in waste to energy plants releases more greenhouse gases, total greenhouse gases, 1.7 times more than a coal-fired plant. So if we really want to go for energy, let's go for real renewable energy solutions, right? So I would say let's not burn them, use them for waste energy, and let's not also fall for this new thing of industry, which is chemical recycling. Let's take them, let's use pyrolysis, let's use all these chemicals to break them down into new chemicals and so on. One, it produces a lot of toxic material. Two, it's highly energy intensive. And of course, three, the economics is simply not good. That's also a response to another question I saw, where we need to also look at the economics of these things. So it's a problem still to be solved, and hopefully all of us from different fields can put our heads together on what to do with all the legacy plastic.
I do agree indeed, Dr. Emmanuel, that this question is in fact very difficult to answer, and that it requires an sectoral collaboration that for us to be able to finally address the efficient and the sustainable ways and how we could actually address the existing plastics or the legacy plastics, as I mentioned, that we do have now. So for our last question, we have a question from Green Vianshan. It states, how to fight against global corporations that flood the southern countries with cheap plastic and products changing our environment and health, such as Coca-Cola, Unilever, Carlsberg, and etc. So maybe you could address this to Ms. Miriam.
Yeah, the rise of policies holding companies accountable are one way that we can actually fight against global corporations that flood the global south. And another is also we're seeing a pattern of litigation being filed by cities and states as well as individuals against big polluters. Those are two key measures, I think, that will make these big polluters start to change. But I really want to emphasize policies because what they can do is not just attack one particular corporation as what you do with litigation, but policies will ensure that entire industries or entire sectors follow regulations. And we can take examples from what we've seen, not just in community models or solutions like our project here at Greenpeace, or examples from our allies like Juana Zero Express from Mother Earth Foundation, or ALNER in Indonesia. What we can do is share all of these experiences and learnings and also provide them to the different industries so that they know that these business models are potential, are viable as well as accessible now, and they can start scaling all of these solutions. At the same time, we can also share this to policymakers so that it can guide them in crafting the right legal framework to drive all of these companies towards a reuse-based economy.
All right, so thank you so much for that answer, Ms. Marian Ledesma. And to also entertain our other speaker from Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, Dr. Michelle Reyes, if you would want to add with a question with regards to this.
Yes, so well, from Healthcare Without Harm, what I can share is that aside from what we are trying to get corporations or even the big sectors accountable as well, we also work with them and share with them case studies that this is what is happening on the ground. Healthcare facilities and health professionals are already joining us in our voice. Hence, these stories might be useful for them. These are data that are useful with them, such as pharmaceutical industry, because in terms of waste and plastics in the health sector, could help them identify where we can reduce in terms of the plastic pollution. At the same time, trigger any research or innovation towards the medical devices or even non-medical devices that are being used in the healthcare sector. So we're making them accountable. At the same time, we work with them on how we can find solutions as well. Thank you.
Wow, that is great to know, Dr. Michelle, that you have been working hand in hand with these corporations, not just holding them accountable, but actually work with them in person so that they would be able to address these issues firsthand as well. So thank you so much for that insight. So unfortunately, guys, we cannot entertain any more questions. However, for other questions that you guys have, and so grateful that you have a lot of questions and you're very much interested for asking questions to our esteemed panelists. For other questions, though, they can be you can guys message us on the Greenpeace Philippines Facebook and Instagram pages. So before you go, we request participants to answer the feedback form, and you can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or go to act.gp/truth or toxic feedback. So e-certificates will be issued when requested through the feedback form. On behalf of the organizers, Greenpeace Philippines, Healthcare Without Harm Southeast Asia, and Planetary Health Philippines, such as well as Miriam College Environmental Studies Institute and the Philippine Academy of Family Physicians, Special Interest Group on Planetary Health, we would like to thank all the speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise with all of us. And thank you to all the webinar participants for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. Please expect an email from us for future events. Again, I'm Evan Marie Pilapar, wishing us all a meaningful World Environment Day. Together, let's build a plastic-free future. Thank you very much.